The state of Minnesota, we are trapped in this Democrat machine.
You ask any average citizen, do you even know what ranked choice voting is? No, what's that? And you describe it to them, they're like, why would we want that? I don't understand.
Let's just face the fact. We like what the government has given us, but we don't know what the cost is. Okay, the benefit is I get this, I get that, gimme. My name is Jimmy. Everybody's on the payroll. Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn, your host, glad to be with you on this Thursday night, the 6th of February, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. In my ongoing efforts to showcase for a national audience and for our Minnesota viewers and listeners the nuts and bolts of politics, this week I have two in-studio guests. One of them is Ms. Pam Altendorf, who is a Minnesota state legislator, an elected representative of We the People. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you for having me, David.
And I've got to my left a friend of mine. We've walked a circuitous path together, Ms. Patricia Williamson, who is the chair of the Carver County Republicans, an officer of the Minnesota GOP. Welcome to you.
Thank you, David.
I'm really glad you both came in. For the audience, I'm going to say this right up front because for Dan Schultz, who I am aligned with in the precinct strategy, politics is entertainment unless you actually practice the art of politics. I'm not trying to run any of the audience off, but those of you that have been watching and participating in this online community, this streaming service community, know that I'm a participant, that I'm an activist, and that a very big part of what I'm doing in these podcasts is to try to move every audience participant from passivity to activity and then to productivity. And when I say that, I say it with this great anxiety. President Trump won. We have 4 years. We have a midterms that is coming up right around the corner, and then 4 years are going to pass like a blink of an eye. If American citizens do not come into the political process and we the people do not self-govern, I can almost guarantee you that everything that's happening right now will be reversed by executive order on the 21st of January in 2029. I don't want to live through that because if these communists come back into power, they will come back with a vengeance. So for me, it's a matter of self-preservation. For Pam Altendorf, who's an elected representative, it's self-preservation. For Patricia Williamson here in Minnesota, and we're in Minnesota. We're coming to you from the studios of Free People Radio. We're coming from the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's communism in the upper Midwest. So the point of this is please stay engaged. Please stay with it. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of politics for you to get motivated and understand how this works. Having said that, Pam Altendorf, just like Drew Roach before her and Walter Hudson, who appeared before him, they're engaged in one of the most acrimonious fights in the Minnesota House that I've seen in the 60 years I've been watching the House. So, Pam, before we get into all the other issues I'm sure we're going to get to, would you like to comment on what you see going on? And you could even work in for people where you're from, who you are. Take the stage.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I ran for the first time in 2022 in Minnesota. That was after COVID and just being very frustrated with walls shutting down our government, letting Minneapolis burn, shutting down our churches. All of that was enough for me.
That would be Tim Walz,
Yep.
who ran for vice president.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that was enough for me to get motivated to think, someone needs to step up. And that was my moment to step up and run. So just to give you a little background, this is my second term. And we just finished my first term where the Democrats had the trifecta, where they had Walz as the governor, they had the Senate, and they had the House. We were in a complete trifecta, a Democrat trifecta. And in that 2 years, it's math, right? I knew going into it, at the end of the day, the Democrats were going to win. They had more votes than the Republicans. What I didn't realize was the complete breakdown of our government, because in the first term that I served, when there was that Democrat trifecta, there was absolutely no compromise. There was no working with the minority party. I mean, we were literally steamrolled by the Democrats in that first term. And I'm not sure how much the public understands how much legislation was passed under that rule, because they're kind of just starting to find out about it now. Our Minnesota media really does. I mean, it's a disgrace
Our
that
mainstream media.
our mainstream media, it's a disgrace to Minnesotans, because on some of these things that passed, I would attest that even as many as 70 to 80% of Democrats would have rejected the agenda that the Democrats were pushing on us in the last 2 years. So fast forward, we had the election of, 2024. I'm running again. And of course, our goal as the House, we were the only people on the statewide ballot. So no, not the Senate, not the governor. And this is how we could break the trifecta. And so, myself and so many other House members, we work so hard, to try to regain control of that House. I went from my first term hearing over and over, well, this was a historical year, historical spending, historical surplus, historical everything. And then I woke up on November 6th to a historical tie in the state House of Minnesota, which hasn't happened since 1979. And so, do you want me to keep on going on the background?
Of course I do.
it's
And then we're going to get to Patricia, and she's going to tell us how it worked out in Carver County.
Okay, so we were tied in the House 67-67. So we ended the trifecta, and we did start it's called power sharing, where because we're tied in Minnesota, both parties have to work together for everything. Who's going to chair committees, even down to parking. Like you literally have to negotiate everything because we're supposed to be in a 50-50 tie. Okay, fast forward, and there was an election in 40B, which is the Roseville district.
And let me ask you a question so everybody knows. What's your district and where are you from?
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
get that in.
I skipped that part, David. Thank you. So I am from Red Wing, Minnesota. It's southeast.
Oh, my goodness gracious. I go there every year to walk the mountain.
Yeah, it's a beautiful district.
Oh, fantastic.
I do claim I have the most beautiful district in the
Oh,
state.
everybody needs to. We're going to have a little tourism advertisement for Red Wing, Minnesota.
Everyone should visit Red Wing.
It is a fantastic tourist destination. Please go ahead. I'm sorry to interject.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I'm a mother of 5, grandma of 1, and we've lived in that area since 2005. So there was one election contest in Roseville where the Democrat, which was Curtis Johnson, there was a lawsuit and a trial because he did not actually live in the district of which he ran. And I mean, the evidence was overwhelming. I believe it was like 300 pages of evidence where his house was outside of the district. They did have an apartment for him in the district, which it didn't have furniture in it. He didn't connect the utilities. He did not live there. And so it was overwhelming to the point that the judge had to rule that this candidate could not take the seat.
Would that be called cheating?
I would say that was cheating. That was definitely cheating.
And was that not done under the watch of Ken Martin, who was running the Minnesota DFL at that time?
100%.
And wasn't that same Ken Martin now elected to the chair of the national DNC?
Yeah, I did see that in the news.
So in other words, if you're cheating, it doesn't disqualify you from national prominence in the Democrat Party.
Right. Not in Minnesota, I guess. You
Right.
can do anything here.
Got it. Okay. Well,
Oh,
just had to get that dig in on Brother Ken.
well, thank you.
Mhm.
That was good. So, yeah, we had this situation where now we went from a 67-67 tie to this one Democrat, could not be seated. And so now, and I know this is really difficult math, but 67 minus 1 is 66. So we went from a situation where we were tied with the Democrats to the Republicans having a majority. 67 to 66 is a majority. I know this has been a really difficult thing for a lot of people to understand, especially the Minnesota mainstream media, but it's true. So we went from power sharing to the Republicans that we were going to go in the first day, elect our leader, Lisa Dameth, as a speaker. And that's when the Democrats decided that they no longer wanted to participate in the regular political process. They had a secret swearing in ceremony. So the Minnesota state statute is very clear. It says that you shall, not may, not optional, says you shall come to the chamber on the first day of session at noon and be sworn in by the Secretary of State. And what the Minnesota House Democrats did was 2 days before the first day of session on January 12th, they were sworn in by a retired judge, like in the dark of night. They didn't tell anybody. Nobody was there to witness it. And they said that that's legit, which, I mean, it is breaking every law of that Minnesota state statute. So I definitely fall in the category of I don't even believe that the Democrats are officially sworn in. I don't believe that.
I make it 67-0.
That's
Yes,
right.
it does,
That-
doesn't it?
So we went from, like I said, tied to 67-66, and now the Democrats in Minnesota are having a complete temper tantrum, refusing to come in, because if they would come in, we would elect Lisa Dameth as the speaker. And so they're refusing to participate. It's like, I feel like we're in a situation where, you know how we went so many years of giving all the kids the participation trophies?
Yeah.
We have adults now in the Minnesota House that they want their participation trophy. Even though they lost and they're in a minority, they're not going to come in. They're not going to play. And so our government, the Minnesota government, if you think of a three-legged stool of the governor, the Senate, and the House, the Democrats are literally trying to kick out one leg of our Minnesota government.
And what's the situation in the Senate for our viewers and listeners? What's the apportionment there for power?
Yeah. Well, for anyone, hopefully people are following along with Minnesota politics, but if you tried to write this story, you couldn't have come up with this script. And the Senate went from a 34 to Democrat, 33 Republican. The Democrats had the majority the last session. To this session, very unfortunately, they did lose one of their Democrat senators. She passed away from cancer. So that went to a 33-33 tie. Now, for your listeners, one of the senators in the Senate, the Democrats, Nicole Mitchell, last April, in the middle of the night, allegedly in the middle of the night, drove from her residence in Woodbury 3 hours to her stepmother's house. I believe it was a 3-hour drive. Snuck in the window wearing all black. She had her hair braided black. She had a black stocking cap on. Crawled in the window, and she was arrested and charged with a felony for burglary. And this is being completely ignored. Now, this case, so again, this would decide the majority of the Senate. And this trial has been delayed 3 times. And so this senator, the Democrat, is the deciding vote on all of the legislation that passed last year. On the 1,431-page omnibus bill, they have
That's a spending bill.
That was the omnibus bill. They have their deciding vote in the Senate is a senator who is charged with a felony.
Under indictment.
That's right.
All right. Now, in the interest of parity, I have my friend Patricia Williamson on my left. I'm going to pass it off to you in a second, but I'm going to make some comments as we go around the table. We're spending all this time on elective politics, we the people. We're finally waking up. I mean, really, we are waking up. We're actual citizens. We even have some guests in the room that wanted to watch this, which is a first. I think that's super cool. Welcome, David. I'm glad you're here. I had a Minnesota citizen call me. He said, "You mind if I watch this?" Boy, we're going to have to sell seats in here down the road. But the point is that the citizens are awakening from their slumber, somewhat the way Admiral Yamamoto, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, said, "I fear that all we've done is awaken a sleeping giant." So the sleeping giant is awakening. But We need a functioning local party because there's another branch. You said there was 3 legs of government. We left one out. That's the judicial branch, which is perpetually ruling against the Republican Party of Minnesota because all the judges are leftists. I'm not going to call them Democrats. They're communists. Okay, I'm just going to call them what they are. Let's get the branding right. And we got a lot of people, the young people like that communist branding, the TikTokers. Some of them, Tanner, I know you're not Mike, but there's a lot of people that like communism, right? Right, because they don't understand what it means. It means tyranny. We got to make sure we rebrand this thing as it really is. But we need a functioning Republican Party in every district because the scope of governance is so great that nobody is looking at these judicial races. We need people like Patricia Williamson to be looking at the judicial action in Carver County and holding those judges responsible when they kick loose the illegal criminals that are in our state. Patricia, isn't that a nice way for you to start off?
It is a nice way to start off. Thanks,
Remember, you got to have
David.
that mic discipline. Get that
Thank-
mic close to you.
Okay, so I hope that's good enough, Tanner.
1/5.
Yeah, one
Gotta get-
fist.
yep, there
All
you
right,
go.
well, I got to lean back in here.
Okay.
So, thank you. So, yes, I live in Carver County,
Which is south of the Twin Cities.
it's kind of to the southwest. So it's kind of in a nice location, but unfortunately, it takes a lot of cues from Hennepin County. It seems from an election perspective, just in the way that we operate at the local governance. But so that's a hair knot in itself. But let's start with where you left off. I guess I don't know what else you want me to say. I'm a mother of 2. I've got 2 girls. I got one that boomeranged home recently. So,
Well, you
nice
can
to
tell
have
us
her
why
back.
you got involved in the Republican Party of Minnesota. That's
Well,
an interesting question.
because I moved here. Otherwise, I mean, I have been involved with Republican Party stuff at one level or another my whole adult life.
And why? Why? Because there's people out here, we want to get them involved. What made you get involved?
Well, my grandfather was very much astute at following and writing. I mean, back before Twitter and Facebook, we're looking at 45, 50 years ago, right? He wrote his House members and senators, and he told us, I remember as a young person talking with him and him showing me letters to, I grew up in Missouri in the St. Louis area, Representative Dick Gephardt. Okay.
Okay, we're going to have to let everybody know who Richard Gephardt is.
Richard Gephardt was a Republican. No, wait, he was a Democrat.
What's the difference? Go ahead.
I don't know. Yeah, see, clearly I don't know. I think I remember that he was he was my rep for my area in Jefferson County, Missouri. He ran for president at one point, but he's kind of a redhead and his eyebrows are kind of light. He just didn't have a good look on TV. So I kind of credit that. And he's a little bit different, soft-spoken. But through that influence, and my grandfather passed away when I was in 5th grade. Or before I hit 5th grade. So it's not like I had a lot of good adult interaction with him, but enough that he told us the importance of being involved in your, as you like to call it, self-governance, and how critical it was. And we were raised in my home state, even through our high school civic classes, that it was important for citizens to respectfully consider what our government would tell us and think critically about it and be able to do what modern day we would call a pushback, or at least be able to interact, to express yourself, and to hold those people to what your needs were as a citizen. And that the function of government was a mutual symbiotic one, not where we were dictated down to. And that it was to the government's responsibility to communicate effectively, to rationale as to why things were being done the way they were, to be responsive to the citizens. But it's a job of the citizenry to do that too. You have to be paying attention. You have to be beyond just the superficial crust of what's going on. You have to be willing to look deeper. And my grandfather instilled that, I guess, when I was young.
So your grandfather, your family lineage
Yeah.
had a familial cultural imperative of being involved beyond just voting or not voting.
Yes.
So
And we all voted religiously.
but then you decide to get involved in the
Mhm.
party in Missouri,
I was a college Republican at
and
Mizzou.
then at a certain point you come up to Minnesota for jobs or
Via
family or
Yeah, I
whatever it
went
was.
to Oregon for a while, so I had 3 years out there. I didn't do anything, and then I was in Illinois for a good part of my start of my career, and got involved in some things out there with some things like, because you didn't have caucus in those states, so you had to do petition drives to put candidates on ballots. So got connected with some people, had to try to help drive and get some petitions signed for some things. Herman Cain, when he ran for president, I actually was out collecting signatures for Herman Cain in Central Illinois at one point. There was Tea Party started up down that way, and so got connected with people there. Ended up in the collar counties of Chicago for a while. Next thing you know, I'm throwing candy in parades up there. And then when I moved to Minnesota 8 years ago, thought that, that we're going to just take it easy. And I didn't really look or think deeply about what the politics were here. I was coming for work. And, I had young kids, and I just could not seem to get involved. It was really strange when I first arrived in Carver County, trying to find people, get connected. I'd sign up, never hear back. I didn't really have an idea what was going on, but I was also busy with younger kids, so it took a little bit of while to get that traction.
So the point of this is, for those of you that are watching us, we're just regular citizens. Pam emerged out of her, was it a farming background more or less, or from a
Yeah.
farming type of
I mean,
community?
I grew up on a farm, and then my adult life, mother of 5, my husband and I have a sales business, and then we have some rental properties. So
You're just
I basically work out of my home.
you're just a citizen.
I'm a regular person.
And Patricia's just she's a very accomplished person, educated person, but just a person, right?
Well, yeah, I think, well, maybe I have a little bit different thing because I do get involved with my day job at more of I understand governance and policy, and because I work in a regulatory affairs capacity. But outside of that, locally, I think what really started to get my
Blood
skin,
boiling.
under my skin was, around COVID and how things shut down, and how the science, as I was following it in the published literature, was not matching up to what we were doing from a policy standpoint and what the government was doing, and the government overall at the time, and some of the things that we ended up with that were not making sense, and ended up getting involved with a group of parents that were kind of pushing back against the COVID protocols. Plus, hearing my daughter, who was a middle schooler, having to go through online classes, and like she'd go into her room and come out 5 minutes later. I said, I thought you were going into your history, it's time for your history class. She goes, oh, we're done. And I go, what? Did they just take attendance and dismiss you? Pretty much.
Gotta stay close to that mind.
Yeah, pretty much. So they kind of, hearing the content and the quality of her education. Now I get it. They were doing things online, but it still didn't excuse some of the things that were going on from a content perspective. And then I decided to homeschool her for 7th grade and did her standard test. And she struggled with reading. This kid's an honor student now in high school. She's a sophomore, but we had to come up 4 grades in her reading capacity in a year of homeschooling her, because and we moved here when she was like just into 2nd grade. And she was testing at the time coming out of Illinois. Say what you want about the nanny state. They actually were doing a good job from an education perspective. And I dare say better than Minnesota 8 years ago. She was reading at a 3rd grade plus level as a 2nd grader. And by the time she hit should have been the entrance of 7th grade, when I did her standardized test, she come in at a 4th grade reading level. And I
Is
went,
this the kid that I know?
yeah, Isabel.
She is a bright light, this kid.
Oh, yeah.
What I'm getting from both of you, if I can just help.
Things were off the rail.
Well, I mean, I just want to say both of you got involved politically because of issues.
Mm-hmm.
Did you reference COVID also as a motivating factor?
Well, in here in Minnesota, this is a fun fact. I think that it should be encouraging to people. But in my class that were elected in 2022, coming into the House, there was 25 new Republicans into the House. And that's a huge portion of the House. It was I believe it was almost 40% of our House caucus was new. And when you started to talk to those 25, that's what was it almost started to get like, wow, this is a little crazy, but it was almost the same story. And it was right after COVID, right? It was 2 years after, and people were saying over and over, I never thought I would run for a political position, and I felt called to do it, and here I am.
Okay, so who out there is feeling the tug? Because we're 180 podcasts into this, and I know we've covered a lot of ground philosophically, religiously, historically, but I'm doing it because I felt the tug. When I'm just going to give my story, my listeners know it. In the 2020 election, I got, do they do SATs anymore?
Yeah, they do.
You know, I maxed out my math SAT in 1976 or 75 maybe. And I'm pretty good at math. And I was sitting there with my slide rule calculating the districts in Georgia. And
Mhm.
I said, President Trump's got to win Georgia. There's no way he can't win this.
Mhm.
And then he lost. And I went nuts. I just said, whoa, this math doesn't work. When math doesn't work, uh, we've left the world that I understand.
Mhm.
Because where I grow up, 1 + 1 = 2. It doesn't equal 3. I guess it could equal 3. You could brainwash people and tell them 1 + 1 = 3, and that's where we've been for several decades. But I just I said, you know what? This is reaching a tyrannical level of manipulation. Now, I've been all over the world, and I've seen a lot of tyranny, and I have experienced familiarly a lot of tyranny. So I have my own reasons for getting involved. But I'm going to say, and I don't know about you ladies, but for me, I wish we had a great social compact that our elected representatives represented the people, and I could be doing the things I really like to do. I'm not saying I really like doing
Mhm.
politics or podcasts. I think it's fun, but there's things I like doing a lot more. And that's for you out there. Yes, there's things you like doing a lot more. That's great. Ask yourself, do you want your kids to grow up in a gulag or be depopulated? We're a little radical around here, because the reason why I say that is I read the material. Our life expectancy is declining, yet we're spending a couple $1 trillion a year on healthcare and healthcare research. So how can our life expectancies be declining when we're allegedly the greatest country on earth and we have broad bipartisan consensus about healthcare?
Mm.
How can we be getting sicker? How can in Minnesota, where you're a legislator, I think 20% of children that are on government programs because their families are below the poverty level, 20% of them are morbidly or obese.
Yeah.
How is that possible? If we have a loving government that has a social compact with its citizens, you'd think that the citizens that are dependent on government would actually be getting a good shake. Instead, they're sick. Okay, I ask myself questions like, so I don't have any answers to it, mind you. At least I don't have any 8x10 glossies. But we have an unwell population in Minnesota. We just have a very high rate of chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. But we have all this money spent on healthcare or chronic disease management.
The other thing that you get a lot of money spent on is education. And I think really education's a big key in all this. Education around nutrition and health is part of it, but education in general is, and that's where I was going with, her reading ability was low. And I think they've set up, and we could go on for days, David, about being set up or setting up a subclass or a people where they're lower class, where they're subjugated and where they are put in a position where they cannot come up or understand or follow, and that they are basically the batteries in the matrix, if you will.
Well, this is so interesting because we're talking about education. As we sit here, from the news reports, President Trump is preparing an executive order that is going to end the Federal Department of Education, which was established under Jimmy Carter. Now, I was in college when Jimmy Carter was president. And I'm going to tell you, I've done a lot of teaching in my life, people are not as well prepared to learn as they were 50 years ago.
No.
I have one daughter right now at Columbia, and I have another daughter at Cambridge, and they're not nearly as smart as I was at their age. And I tell them that. And I said, you're good, but you aren't great. Don't take yourself too seriously. But, and then here's another thing. You'll like this. My youngest daughter, who is really, she's quite talented. She had a reading disability. She couldn't read. So when she was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, she literally could not read. And I spent myself probably, 3 years, 2 hours a night reading with her. And now I know she's going to get a PhD. She's brilliant. But she would have been labeled with some kind of disease category, and they were going to label her that way. I said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to deal with it. So there's a part of this that's self-governance. I self-governed by taking the responsibility of taking a brilliant person who didn't fit in, who was seemingly challenged, and I taught her how to read. I hope she remembers it when I get older.
Yeah.
She may not, but I remember it, and it's probably one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. Helping my father die. That was a very important thing. I've done certain things that are more important to me. There's all kinds of wealth. There's financial wealth. That's just one aspect of wealth. How we treat each other is a very important part of wealth. Are we kind? Do we love our children? Do we do things for other people? And there's a lot of places where I've fallen short, so I'm not trying to erect myself as some kind of saint. But I do have a couple of things that I care about that as I get older and look back, as a Republican who believes in redemption, I think that's very critical for me. And why I'm having people on, because these are state level people. We got a state party officer of pretty significant reputation. Patty's not just anybody. Everybody knows Patty. Everybody in the party knows Patty. And Pam is a Minnesota citizen that came out of nowhere and got elected. And this is for every one of you. You're looking at people now, 3 people here, jumped up out of nowhere because they love their country and they love freedom. Some of us might love God. I'm not asking anybody. That's not a litmus test. Because as Republicans, you can be an atheist. But the point is, there was something for each of us that was worth fighting to preserve. Now, we have a chance. We have a 4-year window. So I'm going to set up some conversation.
Well, can I finish one other thought?
Please,
You started.
go ahead.
So I would like to introduce some new terms to your vernacular. Going back to the judicial situation, which I think is very closely tied to a lot of what we're experiencing right now and having good judges. There were 2 alternatives on the ballot for the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court Chief Justice and one of the other seated members. And way too many Republicans don't value their vote. So value your vote is a very critical thing. And that means all the way down the ballot. That means you turn it over and you go, oh, I don't know who to vote for judges. Well, do your homework before you go in that ballot box and know who those judges are. Know that you don't want to vote in those incumbents because we know that they're Democrats on that. Could you imagine had there been 2 Republicans on that Supreme Court when they started considering all the different aspects of whether or not they should rule on the quorum issue, what they're going to do with these recalls, other things. The other thing I would like to go back to is Curtis Johnson and that situation over in 40. When you sign up, if you come out of the citizenry and you go to file for office, you have to file an affidavit for candidacy that affirms your residency requirements. I'm going to bring your cheat term to fraud. It's a word that I do not throw down lightly. He fraudulently represented himself. The party, the DFL, fraudulently represented him as a resident of that district. They fraudulently brought forward a candidate. They need to own that with responsibility. And they need to stop with their shenanigans because they created this lack of tie, as Pam pointed out, themselves through not just simple mistake or error. It was deliberate act. They rented an apartment to give the man an address that he never lived in, didn't have a house with. I mean, gosh, go on Facebook Marketplace and pick up some free furniture, for God's sakes. But the other thing here, they take public subsidy. And if any of you have any wherewithal, go on Minnesota Campaign Finance Board. You can look up every candidate. They have to file periodical reports through the campaign season and a final report at the end of the year. You can look at where they get their money, and there's something called a public subsidy. Curtis Johnson took $14,700 and I think it was $14,702.82 in public subsidy. I want to know when he and the DFL are going to pay it back. I want every citizen, again, value your vote. You should also value your tax dollars and how they're being spent. Who's paying for the special election that's going to be triggered by this fraud that was perpetrated by the DFL and their candidate? That special election costs money. If you just think about the payment of the election judges in all the precincts in that district, which you probably have upwards of 60, 70 people employed to pull that election off full time. They don't pay peanuts. It's not volunteer. They pay for those. And then they pay for all the election materials, the tabulator tapes, the tapes that go in the little machine that you get your little ticket when you go get your ballot. They have to pay for excess ballots. They have to pay for all of that material, printing costs. It's not kind of a meaningless amount of money.
Freedom is not free.
It's not. But people don't value it. They won't go in and, we just had a special election in 60 for that Senate seat, and they had less than 10%. I mean, it was a ridiculous. Less than a quarter of the people turned out to even vote.
And Patricia, on that note, I wanted to talk a little bit too. One of the things that you always hear in the Minnesota media spin machine, the mainstream news, is they say we need to power share with the Democrats, that we're at 6, power sharing happens when you're tied. Okay, so I really want to drill this into the people listening here. Power sharing happens when you're tied. That's a 67-67 tie. That is not the scenario right now. So when people are asking us to power share, when we are at 67, basically what the Minnesota media is doing is writing off that new special election that'll happen in 40B.
In Shoreview.
Yeah, it's Roseville area. Yep. And what they're basically saying is the Democrat has already won.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're saying. And
Okay.
I do
And it's
realize,
not guaranteed.
No, but
I do realize that's a blue district.
There you go.
But you are completely disenfranchising the voters of that district and the people of Minnesota and the will to go out and vote, and especially in a special election where we typically have maybe a 20% turnout.
Do you know what that district? What is that district? What is the district in Roseville Shoreview? Do you know what that is? That 60? Is that what you said?
40B.
40B. It's 40B.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how's our Republican Party infrastructure in 40B?
So we have a really great candidate running there, Paul Wickstrom.
No, not the
Yep.
candidate,
but
the Republican Party infrastructure. Do we have a good party infrastructure in 40?
I've met Paul. I've met his campaign. He is surrounded by smart people, but I have not specifically
There you go.
met
That's
the BPOU, or I haven't gone to that.
I'm not as familiar with that.
Okay, so
BPOU
that's my interest for the listeners. Yes, you have a good candidate. He has a good team. He's getting media. Who's got his back?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have people in the district that are
Yes.
participating in the Republican Party, that have
Mhm.
formed digital networks, that are communicating with each other, that are working with their neighbors, that are working with their co-workers? Is that there?
There is a plan. I mean, there is a plan that they are creating to be very competitive and to go for the win in that district. The Republicans, we are not writing off that seat. We're not writing off that seat, and you will see a movement within the Republican Party to win that seat like that. I don't think we've seen in Minnesota, to be quite frank.
Because that's the game right there
Right.
for the next year and 3 quarters, so to speak.
Right. So, I mean, we are creating a game plan. The campaign, like I said, they have done great on fundraising. This is not a gimme for the Democrats. And it's making them nervous, because what a black eye it would be for the Democrat Party when they are literally standing out on a boycott on a seat And imagine the Republicans winning it. Just
Now,
imagine
this
that.
this guy's name is Roger Wickstrom. That's right,
Paul
Paul Wickstrom.
Wickstrom.
So it's a national audience. I mean, now let's just think about how this works nationally. Nationally, Minnesota has been written off.
Mm-mm.
Has been written off. Why? Because of the trifecta of the last 2 years, A, and B, there is a presumption that national money is better spent other places. I have a completely different attitude about this. I figure if we can beat the communists in Minnesota, they're going to go down everywhere. So why I'm participating and focusing on Minnesota politics, it's not that it's sexy. Hey, it's way more sexy to talk about Charles Darwin and Sir Francis Galton. That's a lot more fun for the audience. This is not that fun. It's way more fun when I go trash Roger Wicker, the senator from Mississippi, who's like a constant source of material to just take this dude down. We got crappy people everywhere. But this is my state. Politics is local. We are spending so much time watching President Trump. Let him do his thing. I can't influence President Trump. He's going to do whatever he wants to do, and I'm going to have to react to it. But in my district, I make the future. In your district, Pam Altendorf is making the future. You can predict the future because you're actually creating it. Same thing with Patty down in Carver County. She can predict the future. Do you realize if you're listening in Minnesota or any other state that if you get involved in politics, you actually are creating the future as opposed to having the future dictate to you how your life is supposed to be? Do you want to be a slave or do you want to be a free person? That's really where it comes down for me. I get pissed off about this because I recognize we don't even have people voting.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting a full, we have a midterm election, 20% of the people show up to vote. And this kind of thing, man, we can thank God for President Trump. And if you're a leftist, if you tuned in, I'm going to tell you why I say that. Forget about all the other issues that are pissing you off. Do you want to have digital currency? Is that where you want to go to? Because if you go to the federalregister.gov and you look at the presidential order that President Biden signed to hurry the introduction of digital currency, and you look at all the Federal Register entries about the Fed, how they were getting ready to replace the dollar. How is that going to happen? Not in a nice way. We're going to go bust, and then we're going to have to replace it, and all your money's going to go away. So if you're a leftist, let's just say you're a leftist, and let's say you have a pretty nice IRA or 401k, and you're looking forward to retiring because, you're not that far left. You don't want to have nothing. You believe in climate change, and you believe in DEI and social equity. You have beliefs, but you're trying to get ahead. You're working. Hey, did you want to give up everything you have for what you believe? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to be poor? Because that's where our government was taking us. That's what you're saying about what happened in the last legislative session when the Democrats controlled every branch of government and they passed a tremendous amount of legislation that would lead to the impoverishment of Minnesotans. Is that a reasonable thing to say?
Yes. And David, I just want to your audience. So Minnesota, I mean, we're kind of like the epicenter, I think, of what's happening in this movement. And so let me just give you a little bit of information. If you go back to 2022, the Republicans were outspent something like 7-1 in this state. And you break that money down even further, and a huge amount of the Democrat funds for their campaign funds, it was something like 60 to 70%. Were coming from out of state. Then you need to ask yourself why. Why is this outside money being funneled into Minnesota to create this complete Democrat trifecta here in the state of Minnesota? And that's what I need your audience to realize, and that's where the fight is. We are trapped right now in a box that's completely Democrat controlled, and we are punching our way out of this box. But we do need people to wake up and understand what's happening so that we can gain some control back of our government. But there's definitely been money and outside influence being brought into our state, however you want to say, to infiltrate these positions, to elect people. I mean, look at Walz. He's not even originally from Minnesota. And you can go down the list. There's a lot of people that have been recruited. Grant Hochschild up in the Duluth area, he's a senator. He's not originally from this state. Andy Smith, a House member down in Rochester, he's not originally from this state. why are we bringing these Democrats into the state and putting them into these positions? And then all of this outside money is being brought into the state to elect them. I mean, there's a lot of questions here that people need to be asking. What is going on in Minnesota politics?
Well,
And there's one going on. So we were talking about 40B, which is coming up with Paul Wickstrom, who's the Republican candidate from here that's running. The gentleman who's stepped up to try to run on the Democrat side, my understanding, as of 2023, just moved here from New York.
well, let's just. I mean, you're asking questions. The Professor Penn podcast has those answers. You
Mm.
can all turn in. You can go look at 179 podcasts. And I'm going to just say, because I've never said this to either one of the two of you, I was actually in the room in 1972. I was 14 when a group of academics from the University of Minnesota made a 50-year plan to turn this state communist. So I know where this comes from because my parents were in that room. Uh, these kind of things don't happen by accident. We have one of the largest land grant institutions in the country, the University of Minnesota. That's really the center of this thing. Let's remember that Mark Elias, who is nationally known for his voting efforts at the legal front, he's a lawyer, he was right here in Minnesota. Let's remember that Amy Klobuchar, who was just recently reelected, with an overwhelming, magnificent turnout in CD5. Almost every registered voter in CD5 went to the polls. It's amazing. She proposed, she was the sole sponsor, and you have to understand how, because, I'm the goofball that reads every bill. Like that omnibus bill, I read it. The bill that, what's her name? The Dr. Kelly Morrison, the women's health care bill. Most bills, how many pages was that omnibus? 1,000 and what?
1,431 pages.
Do you know how long?
Not read by a single person who voted for it.
Oh, yeah, well, some of the constituents read it, but you know how long her women's health care bill was? 1 paragraph. So when they want to make it simple, they certainly can. But what has happened here in Minnesota with voting, our voting system in Minnesota is the model for what wants to be rolled out federally. Had Waltz Harris won and had the Republicans lost control of the House and Senate, Amy Klobuchar was the sole sponsor of the federal election law. And I read that bill and I said, my God, that's exactly what we do here in Minnesota. They're just taking Minnesota's politics, because we are a petri dish, because the professors, the PhDs at the University of Minnesota, in association with certain large globalist organizations that dominate this state from an economic perspective, are a petri dish for how they want the country to be. Which is a great way to ask you, hey, what about my power? I'm 65 years old. What's going to happen to my power when I'm 75? In 2040, let me just give you a little background. Under that last session, I think it was the last session, did they not agree that in 2040, our power would be completely decarbonized here in Minnesota? Did I get that correct?
Yeah, that we called it the blackout bill, the 2040 energy bill. That was a Walls headline bill. And a little fun fact, I served on the energy committee. So I spoke up against that bill many times, but that was nothing but political shenanigans. It was to get Walls's name in the headlines that he passed a 2040 energy bill. Just to give you a little background, California has a 2045 energy bill, and here comes Minnesota thinking we're going to achieve a 2040 energy bill in 5 years less than California with a more extreme climate. I don't think so. That was completely headlines. And I'll tell you, when I had people in my office with a closed door and I drilled down on the numbers and I asked them how this was achievable, they would just literally say, like, don't worry, there's off ramps. There's off ramps.
Is that what Payday ACOM told you?
Everyone knew that this is not achievable in the state of Minnesota. And yet what we're doing is we're putting our energy grid at risk, at high risk of blackouts, because we care more about some sort of pretend headline that Walls is putting up that he passed this bill than what's actually realistic for our state. I sat in an energy meeting where we were asking questions of a testifier, of how we were going to get to the 2040 carbon-free energy. And a testifier, this is on video, said that because we don't have the capacity to do this. Just a little math. I mean, I don't know. I'm a mathematical person too. That's just been me, my nature. And it's like normal people would make the plan, see if it's doable, and then you would set the goal. And what Walls did was set the goal. And then when we asked, how are we going to get to the goal? A testifier literally said, I don't know. We just have to have faith. Well,
Faith in what?
Something will be developed. There's going to be
that
technology.
Something will be developed. That technology will be developed. They knew we couldn't get to 2040 carbon-free energy. It's not an achievable goal. It's not an achievable goal. And yet just one testifier said, we just have to have faith. We just have to have faith.
But it's not their real goal and intent. So that's the problem with a lot of this stuff.
What is their real goal and intent?
Well, I think, we have to look at everything with a little bit more of a cynical eye as citizens. So going back to voting, ranked choice voting was another big issue that came through during the trifecta the last couple of years. Thank God somehow it got derailed. But you ask any average citizen, if I go up and ask the voters, do you even know what ranked choice voting is? No, what's that? And you describe it to them. They're like, why would we want that? I don't understand. And I'm like, that's the point. The intention is to put in place, and it's being done through multiple NGOs, non-government organizations coming in here from other states with funding outside from George Soros, Alexander Soros, from some idiot in Texas that lives in Texas. There's a group out of Florida. Anyway, they're trying to get this in place because it makes it extraordinarily difficult for you to audit your elections so that they can give you an outcome that you can't really trace back as to how we got there.
Okay. Let's slow down. We're going to have to focus for a second. Now, this is really a critical moment for me in this conversation because we're getting into the nexus of globalism, federalism, and the state. I want to leave the voting issue aside just for a second. I want to go back to this energy issue. And the reason why I want to do this is, as a citizen who has a little bit bigger platform than the average citizen, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying as a constituent, I watch very closely what my party is doing. And there's one sidebar comment. I want my elected representatives to help me build my party. I want every time you go someplace to stand up and ask people, are you a precinct officer? Have you joined your local party? That never happens. Never. I never heard it one time. And I'm going to start asking everybody that I meet that's an elected representative to help us build out the party because we want to get you elected. But if there's nobody underneath you, you're on your own. And I want to have, not we, that's a cognitive distortion. Because I know a lot of people in the party, the last thing they want is for the party to go full staff and be functional. Because that would mean we, the people, like my guest, Mr. David, could actually participate in something that would be citizen governance, citizen self-governance, which is what I believe in. Very messy, very difficult to control, but essential if we're going to maintain our republic. That's sidebar. The main idea for me is, you're on that energy committee. What are the issues that we are going to work on as party officers and as elected representatives this next 2 years? What are we going to go after? Oh, well, we really don't want to go after this energy thing because, this is a very liberal state. It's purple in some of these districts. Got a lot of elected representatives in purple districts. They don't want to talk about climate. They won't get reelected if they do that. Yet our president just signed executive orders that ended the Green New Deal, and he calls it the Green New Scam. He's opened up massive opportunity for fossil fuel export and fossil fuel development. And he's just said, no, I'm going to tell you, I drove to your Carver County convention, it was the CD6 convention when you had your convention in 2024. I drove there.
Okay.
I drove from CD1's convention. They were on the same day. I drove through a windmill farm. And I was driving, and I was in a hurry to get from one convention to the next. And I felt like I had entered a science fiction movie. I'd never seen that before because I'm a city dweller. I was terrified by that. I'm driving along, and for miles, miles and miles and miles, all I saw was windmills.
Yep.
Did you see the
Yeah.
solar panels on the farm?
I
Yeah.
saw that too. And you know what I have to say about this? This
Mhm.
is not natural.
No, absolutely not. And this is just this is actually crazy. But I will tell you, I mean, they are marketing masters. They are strategists, and they've been manipulating our words. They've been manipulating the people for years, priming to get us to where we're at right now. So if you go back, I mean, 20 years or even longer, everything that they've been doing, it's like they attack and go after people's, because I believe most people are good. Most people are kind. Most people want to do what's right. And so they've been just priming this pump about, climate change and all of this to make people so fearful that they just fall in line with this agenda of moving to this. But again, if you look at the state of Minnesota, we are one of the top states for agriculture. And what they are doing is putting windmills and putting solar panels all over good farmland all over Minnesota. Now, if you're looking at this from a 30,000-foot view of the whole country, that is a terrible idea. You don't cover up farmland that we need to feed people.
Or you do if you want to starve people.
Exactly.
If you want to, there was a 30, was that a 38 story at the Ameriprise building?
Oh yeah, 31,000.
Mhm.
Or 30 story.
30 story. It was last sold for $200 million in 2016. It sold last week for $6.5 million. Okay,
Bargain.
so if you read the United Nations Agenda 2030, which I don't think very many of our legislators have read, if you'd read that, you'd recognize that it's not an accident.
Mm-mm.
It's not just marketing. Our Democrat Party here are communists here. They are legislating the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Why are they able to get it done? Because we've got the University of Minnesota here, which is closely tied on a research basis, because all these federal funds come in to support the research, develop the PhDs. They go out, the students we got generation after generation of students. You say, well, how'd they get that way? I was in sixth grade in 1968. My sixth grade report was on air pollution in London in 1968. I still have it. And, my point is, we used to have this thing, people stand on street corners and barrels and go repent because the end is near. These are the same people. They just don't believe in God. We used to repent because the end was near because we believed in Christ. Well, now they got that axed out. Now they kept the repent because the end is near. It's a powerful human motivator because we all have an end point. So they've manipulated us with fear. If we don't do this, we're all going to die. Now, my point is, with that long preamble is, what are we going to do as Republicans when our president, and all the people around him is destroying the ideological framework of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order? That's where we're living. That's who these people, they're destroying it. Are we going to preserve it because we're nice here in Minnesota? Or are you going to go after it as legislators?
I would absolutely hope that we're all going to go after it. And what's happening at the federal level cannot be a bigger gift right now for the state of Minnesota. We need this in so many different ways, like I said, because, and I mean this, the state of Minnesota, we are trapped in this Democrat machine. We truly are. Any avenue that you would legally take, whether it's the judicial, the attorney general, every side of this box, we are trapped in as Republicans or conservatives. And I even include all the common sense Democrats. There's a lot of people that don't understand what's happening here. How are we going to get after it? Well, we're going to get federal pressure. Again, we saw some of these things, solar, that failed in European countries. We don't have to look that far. Here in Minnesota, how many of our days are cloudy or we have snow cover, that solar panels don't work, that windmills don't spin? This isn't difficult to think about, David. And yet what the Democrats did is they're shutting down our coal plants. And just to give you an example, so this year we tried to introduce a bill that would take away the moratorium on nuclear, because that's truly the future of energy. And then these Democrats who are claiming in the Senate, oh, we're going to power share at 33, for a little while. they were at 33. And as soon as they came back into power, they got rid of this moratorium that we were trying to pass, on the nuclear. And so it's again, we're trying, and I think people have to give the Republicans a little bit of grace because we are fighting within this machine, but it's going to take the public waking up and demanding this of the Democrat Party to reverse some of these things as well.
Well, when the people wake up, the first people that got to wake up, the shock troops, come into the Republican Party. We've got to get and this is my opinion, it's just my military strategy. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just what I'm working right now. We've got to get the party staffed with activists. I'm a super activist. Patty is a super activist. Super crazy. We're working around the clock on this stuff. At the expense of family life and work life.
It's important. It's more important than anything else for your children and their future to be engaged. And it doesn't have to be that you are in a position to handle every aspect, but touch the thing. If you're a trucker, look at what they're doing in trucking as far as regulations. Look at what they're doing on reg.gov. I think you've mentioned regulation.gov as one thing from a federal level. Look at what's going on in various House committees, whether it be the safety committee or other ones. Anything that has a tangent to your work or home life. If it's education, you're worried about PSEO. There's been a lot of active parents that got involved with PSEO, but then they fall away when they could unite in strength, because there's more of us when we come together than anything, and that makes a tipping difference.
Hey, you know what? My marketing people got down on me. They said, you never talk about TireGet. And I forget about the economic engine that keeps this thing going. If you're a trucker, go to support@tireget.com. That's support@tireget.com. And guess what? You're going to get the best deal on truck tires you could ever imagine, and I will deal with you myself. Just a short plug because we got to pay for this. Nice studio, isn't it?
I love it.
It's pretty awesome, but it takes money to run the machine. So you can support us at tireget.com. If you need your tires, go there, call me, I'll help you. You can go to the Free People radio store. I would have completely forgot about plugging for you know who's great at this? I know you probably both don't watch. Alex Jones. Alex Jones will talk about the world's coming to an end. He'll just take you right to the edge. He's such a good actor. And then he just pops right into a pitch, and people go, oh, that's kind of tacky. But actually, for me as a salesman and you as a marketing person, you have to say it's pretty impressive. We don't have George Soros giving us any money. We are not an NGO. This is another thing that's coming. You got the cavalry is coming. These NGOs that are in Minnesota that are federally funded are going to get strangled out of existence right now.
Right. That's the money funneling system, and I think it's starting to really get revealed, but that's federal and Minnesota, is the money funneling system has been through these nonprofits. So our government, both state and federal, are funding the nonprofits, and then if you follow the money, because most of this is public, you really can research these, then you look at the nonprofit and someone's sitting on the board, or they're bringing in a big salary, and then that person, guess whose campaign they're donating to? It's the Democrat Party every time. And so that's the money funneling system, and it's actually coming from the people's taxpayer dollars. So once you get into this nonprofit, there's no oversight of the government, and that's how they've skirted this money.
Okay. Slow down.
And there's
Everybody slow down. Slow down.
That's what they're doing.
Slow down. Slow down. I'm a citizen. I read everything. This is not just because of the Democrat. This is a joint effort in Minnesota. I have a real bone to pick with some of the people. Some of them are out of governance now, like Paul Gazelka. He's no longer playing. He's back up selling insurance in northern Minnesota, where he came from. Sorry, ladies. I know where a lot of that money came from in that last election cycle when we got waxed and there was a trifecta. In other words, the Democrats controlled everything. It was the money that the Republican Party agreed to give Governor Walz as part of the huge infusion of funds that came into the state, because Nancy Pelosi is a dark lord. She knew that one of the ways to create communism is flood the zone with money. So all this money came in here. There was this huge budget surplus, and there was an argument about what to do with that money. You know, if you're in governance and you're a Minnesota citizen, let's just face the facts. We like what the government has given us, but we don't know what the cost is. We're taking the benefits and not looking at the cost. Okay, the benefit is I get this, I get that, gimme, gimme, gimme. My name is Jimmy. Everybody's on the payroll. The cost is when I drive through southern Minnesota, the farmland that grows the food that I eat has been converted to an energy system that won't keep me warm. We have to understand what's going on here. Now, I'm not going to say for sure that these people are ill-intended. They could be incompetent. What's the result? The same. I'm hungry and I'm cold. Okay, so the people that have allowed this funding of these NGOs at the federal level, oh, that is clipped. And I'm going to tell you what's going to come out of this, one thing or the other. It's going to turn out that this whole effort didn't uncover anything, and it's going to be a huge problem for the Republican Party and for President Trump. Or they're going to find a tremendous amount of fraud and waste and abuse, and it is going to damage these people, these communists, forever, because we have allowed in our state, because we're such good people. Hey, we have a lot, like you said,
We care.
We care.
Well, we're seeing this. I mean, we're seeing this right now with the USAID this week, and the money that's being funneled away from our government, and there's no oversight. We're seeing it.
How about the 700? Are you talking about the $700 million of fraud that has been uncovered under the Waltz administration?
She's talking about USAID
Oh,
at the
USAID.
federal level. And that, I mean, if you start looking, if you go on X, oh my lands, some of the things that are coming out, and it's easy to find. All this stuff is hidden in plain sight through whether it's campaign finance reports at the FEC and other places. There's a place called Open Secrets. You'll see like people were exposing Bernie and I hate to say the nickname. What's her name?
Oh, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch of them that have been outraged over some of the stuff, but they're taking a lot of money from large pharma and they're claiming they don't. But if you go to opensecrets.com, you can look for yourself. But the other aspect of this, I think that we need to concern about at the local level here in Minnesota is that this every day, and it gets to be numbing. People go, oh, more fraud. Guys, it's running in such a way that there has to be a blueprint or a template, a pattern of behavior that has been facilitated by Governor Walz and his party that has brought forward all this. And they are, you used to use this, they're skimming off you. And you're thinking you're paying to feed the kids at the school. You're paying to take care of the needy. You're helping as a good citizen. At what point are you going to understand that no kids went starving during Feeding Our Future? There weren't kids falling over fainting in the streets of Minneapolis, but there were people bilking us for millions.
Hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions, and buying vacation houses, and nobody starved. Means that money that we put into those NGOs or those programs wasn't needed to begin with.
That's right. Yeah. And David, you brought up the fraud in Minnesota, and that's been in the news. And I do give a little bit of credit, for some of the Minnesota mainstream media has brought that up. But American Experiment has done a great job. They have a fraud tracker. It's over 600 million provable fraud on the books, but many people estimate it's over $1 billion easy. And this fraud is happening all under the Walz administration. So you said, you need to be on X. And the one thing when I was elected into office, being in this Democrat trifecta, I really felt like, okay, the only thing I have is my voice. That's it. I mean, the Republicans, we haven't always done the best job of communicating our message.
Hey, can you sing?
No.
Well, you got a heck
Don't
of a,
ask me to sing.
You
No.
got a heck of a voice.
You don't want to ask me to sing.
This woman's got a voice.
You don't want to ask me to sing, but I said all I have is my voice. That's it. I knew the position I was in. I knew it, that we were not going to win votes, but I was like, we have to do a better job as the Republican Party to get our message out there to the public and to get people to understand what's happening. And so I have gotten very active on X. I have gotten very active on Facebook, although I was being censored very heavily. And for some reason, that just kind of lightened in the last couple of weeks. I don't know if someone new came into the presidency, but all of a sudden people are seeing my posts again on Facebook. On X, I just getting to my point, but when you're talking about this fraud, I literally started hashtagging it, #Minnesota Mafia. And then I do AKA the Minnesota Democrats. also known as the Minnesota Democrats. Because here's the thing, and this is what I want the public to understand perfectly clear, is you can have one fraud scandal, and it could have been an accident, and I have grace, and I will give someone grace, but then that person needs to fix it. They need to hold someone accountable. Walz has never done that, never held anyone accountable to my knowledge. No one from his administration has been fired. Okay. So now when we have fraud after fraud after fraud, this is what my point is. This is not on accident. The Minnesota government is a criminal organization, and I will say that
Oh,
clearly.
go back and
It's
look.
a criminal organization because you cannot accidentally have this much fraud in one state. You
Go
can't.
back and look at, if you want to do your own homework, go back and look at how the money got chopped up just before you became a freshman. There was a $500 million slush fund that was given to Governor Walz in an agreement with my party. He used that to fund the election in 2022. I know this. I was in the room. I mean, I was pissed about it, but I was too young and I didn't have the voice I have now. I just said, wow, that's a shocker. See, what I would do, because I've been involved in business since 1979. I mean, what I do is a full contact blood sport. And I would like to get along with everybody, but I'm also about just being honest about what we're doing as citizens. When my dad was teaching at the university when I was young, like in the 60s, I think he made $7,000 a year. And he had to teach 9 months, and he had 4 hours of classes and 2 hours of office time that he was contractually obligated to provide to his students. So he had to work 6 hours a week, 9 months out of the year, for like $5,000-6,000 a year. To feed me and my mother, he worked for the city of St. Paul filling in potholes. He loved teaching.
Mhm.
That's why he did it. Now, what does a PhD tenured professor make at the University of Minnesota right now, Patty, would you say?
I don't really know,
Can't even guess?
but their administration staff is excessively high. So beyond it's hundreds of thousands of dollars annually for the people that are on an administrative level.
Okay, there's one little group. Now we'll go over to public school. Oh, we can't talk about our teachers. Oh my God, everybody loves the teachers. Let me give you a blast. I don't, and I'll tell you why. A lot of them don't teach very well. I'll say it. I want my children's children, my grandchildren, to be taught, as you were saying, about how to maintain their well-being, not being taught about some of the things that we're teaching now. And we have no control of our educational system. But if they smoke that federal Department of Education, oh, President Trump is going to drive education where? Right into your chamber, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. But let me tell you something on that, your comment about the teachers, okay? I believe that most people get into education because they really love children and they want to help. What the problem is our teacher union, and then it's St. Paul. It's the mandates that the people sitting in the Capitol are pushing on these teachers. And so I want you to really think about that and reframe that, because a lot of these teachers are doing what they are told and mandated by the state of Minnesota and what their teachers union is demanding of them. And that the real problem lies with the teachers union.
Let me ask you a question about that union. Is
what we're
that a democratic organization? Do they elect people there? Do they elect the officers of that union?
I don't know the answer.
Yes, they would. But at the same time, I would struggle to tell teachers, if you're an independent thinking teacher, go ahead and do something different. Be a little bit of civil disobedient. If they're telling you that you have to do all these XYZ, if you're a librarian at the school district and they're trying to shove a particular type of book on your shelf and you don't think it's appropriate for children in the elementary school, don't put it on your shelf. Put it in the back room if you got to have it. But you don't have to shelve it. Honestly, make a choice, stand up. But a lot of this stuff with the Federal Department of Education, you go looking into it, it's the same problem that we're having locally. And that's with these NGOs. So the Federal Department of Education funnels an incredible amount of money to non-government orgs. And another term is a government-created non-government org. I'm like, excuse me?
You know what?
Non-accountable.
Just,
So-
you know what?
so,
Just,
yeah.
no, Pam, hang
But
on.
that
I
comes down-
get where you're coming from. This is the box. There's a very powerful union that is out there active.
Right.
Mhm.
But we don't want to throw the teachers under the bus,
Mm-mm.
because what we're seeing right now is we literally are seeing them starting to rise up and push against the union. And so the educators are not the people that we should be,
Mm-mm.
like going after at all. Like I said, most of these people are lovely human beings, care about their kids, want to do this, and they have been trapped in the system. And you know what? We're starting to see the little fissures. We're starting to see the cracks. And they are starting to push back on their union, and that's a beautiful thing.
Well, I wish Tanner could find that letter from that teachers union leader in St. Paul that we read on the podcast. I think it was number 178. I'm trying to find it on my phone. These people are really, there's education, and then there's political activism.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That union in St. Paul is intense. That leadership is intense, very intense.
They had documents on every house.
And I'm
member.
I'm not here to impugn any individual person, but
Mhm.
these power centers,
Go after the union, though.
these power centers,
Yeah.
these centers of communism.
Hmm.
I'm not running for office. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I'll throw myself on the bus. You're a teacher. Hey, if you're a great teacher, I love you. I've taught my entire life. I know what teaching is about. I want to teach people how to be self-governing. I want my educators to teach my children how to be independent, not codependent.
Hmm.
I'll accept interdependence. That's cool. But don't teach codependency. Don't teach and don't teach lies. Before we came on, I told Pam and Patricia, I don't need anybody to agree with me. Just don't lie to me. Where our education system is full of lying to the students. When you believe a lie, I guess you could say, okay, I guess we left a lot of people off the hook because they were following orders. Okay, that's cool. But when you're teaching things that really are against what it is to be an American, and this is why there's a little bit of stridency in me that you're trying to accommodate. I want my elected officials to recognize.
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you. It's an ask. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reform America. I want to see my Minnesota state elected representatives do the same thing in Minnesota that President Trump is doing federally, because then it's one connected effort. Because on the other side, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the DNC, and Minnesota DFL, all the way down to my local Patty Acomb, who's my representative in 45B, which the Republican Party couldn't even field a candidate to run against. Isn't she the chair of that environmental committee that you were on, or isn't she?
She's energy. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, great. There you go. They're all in what's called lockstep.
I'm with you. I live it. And this has been painful. I mean, I live it. I'm there.
Well, can't we
But
do that? Can we
will
do
the
that on our
Will
side?
the Republican Party rise up to the occasion? Absolutely. And you're seeing us fight in the House right now. Like, we are motivating the public, I believe, like they've never seen. Daily, we are getting, and this is what's really exciting, is organic emails. Daily, we get, keep up the fight. We support you. Don't power share. And what's beautiful about it is this is completely organic. So people from across the state are recognizing what we're doing. They're proud, they're excited, and we are giving a little bit of energy and hope back to the conservatives and Republicans that I know are all across this actually very red state. Once we can get a little bit more power, we're going to be able to pass some of those things that you're talking about. We're working on it.
In the 12 minutes we have left, if you can. If you can't, just say I can't. Since you're in the caucus, after we get through this period of adjustment, because at the end, there's going to be an end point of this fight over who's in control.
Yep.
And then and then legislating is going to start. Regardless of who is in control or where the votes are, what are the primary objectives of the caucus in this legislative session? What are the legislative objectives?
Yep. So absolutely. So we went from a $19 billion surplus, when I started in 2023, the Democrats spent it. They raised taxes an additional 10 billion. That's a 40% increase in our budget. So I would ask any person in Minnesota, did your budget raise 40%? Did your business increase 40%? People can see very clearly this is not a sustainable growth. When we look out now, the projection for the state is we're looking at a deficit. So when you ask for the priorities, it's literally like we are coming into this mess and we have to clean up what they did. We are going to have to repeal. We are going to have to this agenda that they pushed on us the last 2 years. So something like paid family leave. This is a high priority. We have to delay the date on this or repeal this because paid family leave. Now, this is for small businesses, but the Republicans tried to exempt our public schools from this. This alone, if implemented, could bankrupt our schools, the paid family leave. And so these are things that are dire need that we have to look at. There's lots of things, for education. There was so many mandates pushed on our schools. I just came from last week, a Southeast Minnesota superintendent meeting, and people are waking up. People that typically have supported the Democrat Party right now are feeling the pain of what has happened the last 2 years. And so we have, I believe, this once in a lifetime opportunity with what's happening federally, with the climate, people are going to see results federally. And we need to get ourselves in a position that we can actually do bigger things. Right now, we're not in that with the governor still being a Democrat, being Walz. But everything's for 2026. So to me, this is about educating, communicating, getting all of the Republicans on our conservative message, and then watching all the results federally, and then looking for big, big wins in 2026 so we can actually do permanent changes here in Minnesota.
So if I want to just say back what I heard, the primary strategy for this legislative session is to blunt this excessive spending and try to dial into this family leave issue, which would be a very big burden on the public school system.
Absolutely. Not just the schools, but I mean, we're going to see more and more businesses just closing doors and leaving the state of Minnesota. And you don't have to be a mathematician to figure out the more businesses that we have leave right now in the country, Minnesota is number one in corporate tax. We are terrible on regulations for our businesses, meaning it takes people, the permitting process is terrible in Minnesota. Well, at some point, enough is enough. So we're seeing people leaving the state of Minnesota. Now, that's our taxes. That's our tax base. Every time a business closes doors, it's not just the business, it's the people that are employed there, and people are leaving. This is not a sustainable strategy long term. And so we have to really dial in and make Minnesota again a place where people want to live, come here, work, play. We have a beautiful state, and it's absolutely necessary. We have to look at this from a marketing strategy. Right now, who would want to come here and pay high taxes and live under all the regulations and things that are happening here in Minnesota? Not very many. People are smart. They're going to go to other lower tax states, and it's not here in Minnesota. So we absolutely, number one priority is repeal. And it's to stop some of this legislation that was passed in the
Think
last
you'll
2
have
years.
any Democratic support in that issue? Is there any people that will cross over?
That's the one thing that is just, I mean, it's you can't even explain it, was to see in the Senate, which was in the last 2 years, was only a one-person majority on the Democrats. And the votes that they were willing to take in the Senate to stay lockstep with their party is something that it's you can't even describe it. Some of the votes that those people took, and now this year, I heard they came out, I think it was 9 senators who are in, they're probably at risk for keeping their election in 2026. They came out with, they called themselves the Blue Dog Caucus, the new Senate. And I'm like, yeah, I think most people are wide awake to what you did in the last 2 years, the radical left legislation you just passed, and no one's being fooled by their little Blue Dog caucus. It's actually quite comical.
As a party officer down in Carver, how are you doing building out your party down there in Carver? How do you feel that you're coming? What's your progress? How are you going to be able to support your local candidates in this very important midterm that's coming up in 2026? What do you need from your elected representatives? Because I'm going to tell you, because I don't have any, I resigned from my board, so I'm not like constrained right now. I want my elected representatives to help us build a grassroots party. That's what I want. I want every time the 67 people go someplace, are you a member of your party? Are you a precinct committee man? Are you participating in the party? See, they don't want to do that. And I'm going to stay on these people until they do. Because what do you need down there to watch these judges and to build out the infrastructure you need to ride herd on every aspect of governance? And how big is Carver County? And how many people live in that county? It's a big place.
It's about 75,000 voters in the county. The recent election in 48B was won only by 225 votes. We've got the recall going on. What I need more than our elected officials to be encouraging people into the party, I want people themselves to take some ownership. If you don't want to get in the party, there's lots of avenues. And that's what I try to generate to people is like, find the thing that fits for you. There's affiliate groups that often don't go unnoticed. I qualify now for the senior Republicans. Shoot, man, when did I cross that barrier? But honestly, the Republican Seniors Affiliate Group for Minnesota has some of the best programming once a month. And you can look at it on their website. If you don't want to go in person, get to know people, network with other conservatives. I think Jesse Kelly used to say it well. If you are living in a blue state and you feel isolated, go to a gun show and be surrounded by people that think like you. Go to things that you know get you in the room. So often we provide opportunities. You used to help coordinate the masterclass. Well, I continued something in Carver County called a Citizens Academy. We've tried to talk about everything from our school district issues on out to election situations, and even had Scott Pressler come in and talk about the importance of voter registration and how that can make some differences, as we've seen in Pennsylvania and other places, Virginia and such, that he's driven. I'm trying to encourage that. So I think it starts with the people, not the elected officials. I'm glad that we want to have them to remind people the importance of being engaged and involved, but there's multiple ways to do that. And I want to see people find the shoe that fits, so that they're at least walking the path somewhere. And you don't have to be the chair of your precinct, but by golly, get out there and start talking to your neighbors and friends about issues. Help communicate things like what Pam puts up on social media. Help to share that, because yeah, the Facebook throttles you. It throttles the party. I've been watching our stats on Facebook. I've been really driven on trying to increase our social media presence for the last 2 years, building how many followers we have, helping to grow our email distribution, which is it's slog to do. But you run into things. By the way, folks, if you're not getting emails from us in Carver County, it's because Hotmail, MSN, all these other things, they're bouncing stuff out of the server. So I have to go in and correct fails all the time. There's just so many different aspects of where they down throttle you. You got to do hand-to-hand discussion with your neighbors. You've got to be out there talking to people. And that's the beauty of the party, is coming together with like-minded folks. And that is the start of being educated to some of these issues, what's going on, and being able to have a relationship with your elected officials, whether it's your county commissioners on up. I mean, even the county commissioners, boy, that's a whole story in itself. But being able to have a discussion with them, sit down and have coffee. Julia Coleman's got a coffee coming up. People should take advantage of that moment to have a sit down.
Send me the email, would you?
I will.
Thank you. I show up.
You got to show up, but not only with being educated, but you got to support. We don't have a business to drive money into our accounts. People will come up to me and go, I hate what the party's doing, or the party's not done this. I'm like, well, are you in the room? You got to be part of the thought process. You could be part of the brain trust. You can be part of the muscle, and you got to be part of the money. You can't go, well, I want the party to do this, this, and this. And of course, they're not doing that. And I'm like, well,
are you a delegate?
Money for that?
No. Are you a delegate? That's why we had that little clash over the teachers union. Yes, I know people teach because they love children. They love to teach. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a vote in that union.
Yeah.
So when you vote for communists, hey, I'm not kidding around about this. Myself personally, I'm not cutting anybody any slack because they're wearing a costume.
I think the mask has been lifted. That's what I'm
Mhm.
saying. All across, nobody likes the position we're in right now. Nobody likes it. We're very divided. It's very confusing. There's a lot of things happening right now. But what it's doing is really, I think, allowing people to see things more clearly. When we were comfortable, we were just going about our daily lives, we're ignoring it, and now people are really starting to see it. And the one big difference between 2020 to 2024, 100% is the free speech, is X, is
Mhm.
the
The
ability
podcast.
to communicate, and that was not happening in 2020. And so to me, that's amazing to see, and to see our First Amendment being supported. And with free speech comes truth. And that's what we all have to seek. We have to seek truth.
That is the great Supreme Court decision was it's a marketplace of ideas. Let the best ideas prevail.
100%.
So on that note, I'm very appreciative of you coming in. I've never met you before. It was great to hear from you. Patricia and I have a long history together. It's great to see you again. Both of you are always welcome back here. This here in Minnesota, Free People Radio is one of those forums where citizens are coming to search for truth. I don't tell people I know what the answer is. I tell people I'm searching for truth. And it's great to know you, and we can be in touch. Patricia and I work together. We've been in many meetings together. Patricia, she stood in the breach a few times. Stood in the breach. So, as we close this out, for the listeners and for the viewers, we started out a little bit uncomfortable because we didn't know each other. This was actually really a great conversation. I want to thank you for sharing so much. We need more of this. What the citizens want is for the elected representatives to come into these forums and talk to citizens so we know how to support the party and support the elected representatives. And we're not seeking, I'm not going to speak for other people. I'm not seeking perfect agreement. I'm just seeking honesty.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to agree about every issue. But one thing I will say, President Trump, we're going to live on that hill or die on that hill with him. And I want the people in the party who really didn't support him, which is a lot of people, to recognize that I know who you are. And I really don't care what you think in the dark of the night when you're in your basement. Like, they converted all these Northern European nature religionists to Catholicism, and they went and practiced the old religion in their basement at night. And then, of course, later on, they said, hey, we don't like these Catholics. Oh, Satan, he's the Antichrist. And they put them in the pantheon. What you do in your basement is none of my business. You're an American citizen. But when you come out into the light, we do have a leader now, and we do have a direction.
Mhm.
And I think that direction needs to be the direction for everybody here, because we'll die on this hill if we continue with this disunity, which is blamed on people like me. It was blamed on people like me. It is just But hey, guess who won? It wasn't Nikki Haley. It wasn't Michael Pence. They didn't win. Kendall Qualls didn't win. These people didn't win. Joe Frazier didn't win. Who won? Donald Trump is our president. No, I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump is doing, but I'm smart enough to know in a war where to stand.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, because it is my show, I got the last say. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you. For everybody else, it's Thursday night. Have a great weekend. Be well. We're going to be back next Tuesday, God willing. And remember, this is about your health and your well-being. The weekend is here. Get outside. Walk. Eat sparingly. When you're hungry, it's better for you. That's why you have hunger. If you're full all the time, like Pam was saying, if you're always full, if it's always peaceful and prosperity, you get lazy. We're not living in lazy times. This is a time of great change.
Mhm.
Thanks very much for joining. Tanner, thank you very much. David, thanks for coming in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.